Hello and welcome to our next collective worship. Do you remember last time how we went all the way from creation, see if I can get Africa up the right way, all the way from creation, all the way through to Moses and the Ten Commandments? Well, we're going to carry on our stories of the Jesse tree today, and we're going to start with a story about somebody called Ruth and Boaz. The next morning, the boy did not come. Food poisoning, thought the old man. That sandwich, and he was angry because he couldn't concentrate on the sheaf of corn he was carving. Fool boy, even when he was not there, he could manage to make a nuisance of himself. Then after lunch he came, his hair wet from swimming. Didn't Jesus have any girl ancestors? He asked, not wasting time on hello. Well, of course he did, but they aren't allowed to climb in the Jesse tree, right? Of course they are. In fact, this sheaf of corn I'm carving right now. The old man broke off as soon as he realised his mistake. But it was too late. He was obliged to tell the story of Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite, born in Moab, brought up with a Moabite religion. But when she married a foreigner, an Israelite living in her own country, she found that she liked the thoughts in his head and the beliefs in his heart. She began to say her prayers to the God of the Israelites. Even when her husband died, Ruth did not fall back into her Moabite ways. Her greatest friend in the world was now her mother-in-law, Naomi. Naomi was heartbroken. Her son was dead, and she was marooned, penniless in a foreign country. I must go back to my own people, she told Ruth. I can't stay here with nothing to live on. I'll come with you, said Ruth. But you were born here in Moab. Your people will look after you. You don't want to be burdened with me. Gently, Ruth took hold of the old woman's hand and laid it against her cheek. Wherever you go, I shall go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. So Ruth and Naomi made the long journey to Bethlehem. Two women without a man to keep them fed, sheltered, safe. They had no land to farm, no flocks to tend. In those days, life for a widow was harder than hard, and Ruth had two mouths to feed, not just one. It was harvest time in the field. Ruth went with the other women to glean. That means to pick up the ears of barley left behind by the reapers as they hacked down the crop. The spiky stubble pricked her ankles and her hands, her back ached. The other women shunned her, this foreign woman, this Moabite beauty. For every grain of corn she picked up, Ruth let a tear fall. That was when Boaz saw her, the owner of the field. He was a good, kind man. He asked about the foreign beauty weeping amid his corn, and he liked what he heard. A remarkable girl, indeed, to leave her home for the sake of her mother-in-law. Boaz called her over. When you rest, he said, feel free to sit down with my reapers. And he made sure that the reapers were not unkind to her, and that they let plenty of grain fall as they hacked their way through the corn. Ruth told Naomi all about it when she got home that evening, and Naomi began to think what could be done. Naomi might have had no money to share with her daughter-in-law, but she did have the wisdom of age. I am distantly related to Boaz. He's a good man, Ruth. I want you to do exactly as I tell you. And of course Ruth did, although the advice was astounding and more than a little frightening. Later Boaz went to work on the threshing floor, pounding the ears of corn with a leather flail until they jumped like crickets in the air. The air around him was soon smoky with dust. Threshing is exhausting work, and no sooner had Boaz eaten his supper than he curled up alongside the threshing floor, rested his head on a bale of straw. His greying hair was greyer still with corn dust, his mind busy with busyness and prayers, and he dozed. When he stirred, the midnight threshing floor was pitch black, but for the merest moonlight. To his dismay, Boaz felt a warm weight resting across his ankles. Who's there? And sat bolt upright, only to find the Moabite girl lying across his feet. Boaz blushed, and so did Ruth, though the dark hid their blushes. Her breath shook with fear, but she spoke the words Naomi had told her. I am Ruth, your handmaid. You are a kinsman of mine. Let me creep under your cloak and be safe. Boaz did better. He married Ruth and gave her and her mother-in-law a comfortable home and a place where they belonged. There were whispers among the gossips, of course. Boaz betrothed, Boaz married to a foreigner. But God himself had whispered in Boaz's ear. God, who had once made Eve as a helpmate for Adam. Do you remember the apple? Adam and Eve with the apple. And had brought to Bethlehem a wife of such courage and devotion, of such beauty and selflessness, that she would make his own town immeasurably richer. The gossips were soon won round. On the day Ruth gave birth to Boaz's son, they brought flowers and little presents and broad sunny smiles. What was the baby called? The carpenter pinched the bridge of his nose with his finger and his thumb. Oh, you make me weary with your everlasting questions. Let me see now. Obed. The child's name was Obed. And what are you going to carve for him? The carpenter waved his chisel irritably. Obed's not important. He just grew up to be the father of Jesse and the grandfather of... At last! Jesse! Exclaimed the boy loudly and set the church ringing. Jesse of the Jesse tree! The boy padded away down the church aisle. His hair was dry now. At the door he turned and called, Obed was important, I bet. To Ruth and Boaz, I bet. I didn't mean, said the old man, but the church door banged and he was alone. He went back to his work, but found himself saying, as if the boy was still there, I didn't mean he wasn't important. I only meant that Obed doesn't have a story written down in the Bible. That's all I meant. And he carved a little O above the sheaf of corn. O for Obed. It was only as big as a grain of corn or a teardrop. No one would know it was there except him, but it made him feel better, knowing he had not left Obed out altogether. Right, time for the next one. So the next one is all about somebody called Samuel. Be careful where you step. I put down my spectacles somewhere and now I can't find them. The carpenter was in a towering rage. His woodworking tools lay scattered at the floor of the Jesse tree. Without his glasses, he could not see to work. Without his glasses, he could not see to find his glasses. The boy bounded about the church, searching the side chapels and looking under the pews. You should have a spare pair. Do you think I'm made of money? A spare pair of eyes, I meant. What's this you're carving? It looks like an Aladdin's lamp. He returned to the Jesse tree and stood rubbing it with a cuff of his sweatshirt. It's a cruse of oil, growled the carpenter. In the old days, a man became king only when the high priest anointed his head with holy oil. So is this story about a king or a priest? What story? Was I telling you a story? You may as well, said the boy, making himself comfortable, until your glasses turn up. Okay. There was once a woman who longed for a child, that she made a deal with God. Grant me a son, Lord, she prayed, and I'll give him back to you. True to her word, when Samuel was born, his mother loved him, nursed him, enjoyed and taught him, then gave him up to be a servant in the temple at Shiloh. Eli, the high priest, was a very, very old man, older than the carpenter was, and blind, pretty near blind. He had sons who would take over from him when he died, but in the meantime he had Samuel to be his hands and his eyes. Priest and boy lived out their days and nights in the temple, sleeping on the floor in the big darkness. During the day there was always noise, singing, chanting, the murmur of doves, the twitter of sparrows. At night the silence was solid black, but it held no terror for either of them. Eli's whole world was dark, and as for Samuel, there was the glimmer of the sacred lamp, burning like a single watchful eye. Samuel! Samuel! The boy raised himself up on one elbow. The words had awoken him. The old priest plainly needed him. Perhaps he was ill. Jumping up, Samuel ran to Eli's side. "Yes, master, here I am." "What's the matter, child?" Eli, bleary with sleep. "You called, so I came." "I did not call. Go back to sleep, child." Samuel went and lay down again. "Samuel, Samuel." It was a gentle voice and a very familiar one. Samuel jumped up at once and hurried to Eli's side. "Here I am, master." "I did not call," said the old priest, opening his blind eyes. "You are dreaming a lot tonight." So Samuel went back to bed. But again the voice called to him, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel felt his way through the darkness to Eli's side. "You did call, master, you did." Then Eli understood. "Go back to bed, child. And if the voice calls again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" All his short life, Samuel had been trained to obey without question or quibble. He went back and lay his head down, though his eyes strained open in the darkness and his heart was jumping. "Samuel, Samuel," called the voice, patiently waiting an answer. Samuel knelt up on his bedroll. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And God spoke to him out of the gentle dark, out of the glow of the sacred lamp, or out of the most distant galaxy. "I have news for Eli, bad news, and you must be the one to break it. His sons are not fit to do the work their father has done. They will not live to take this place. You are my choice, Samuel. You are the one I need." When the voice fell silent, Samuel did not want to tell the good old man such crushing news. But the next morning, Eli was anxious to know. "What did God say to you, boy? What secrets did he entrust to you?" Samuel was afraid that the words would kill the old man there and then, but he spoke them faithfully, and Eli nodded, fixing his shineless eyes on the shineless future. Then he patted the air with a trembling hand. "God is good," he said. "Let it come." The Jesse tree stood incomplete. Its lower branches were crowded with leaves and symbols, but the upper branches were still trapped inside the slab of oak, like something ancient, only part unearthed. "I see them," cried the boy, his sharp eyes catching the glint of glass on a stone window ledge. He ran and fetched the spectacles, and the carpenter, after dabbing his eyes, crammed the glasses back onto his face. "Shoo now," he growled. "I've wasted enough time today. I have to get on." "I thought it would be Jesse today," called the boy from the porch, "after the O you carved for Obed." "O? What O?" "Oh, that O," said the carpenter gruffly. "Today, Samuel. Tomorrow, Jesse." Then he wondered why he had said it. The boy would come back now for sure, expecting another story. Okay. So let's put Boaz and Ruth up there. See if they'll hang up there. So there we go. Now we need to find Jesse. Where's Jesse gone? It's here somewhere. There's Jesse. It was not the grief of his son's death that killed Eli in the temple at Shiloh. It was kept Israel's most precious treasure, the Ark of the Covenant. One day. "What? Noah's Ark, you mean?" The boy interrupted. "Ignorant child. This happened hundreds, maybe thousands of years after the flood." "No, the Ark of the Covenant was a wooden box with carved angels decorating it. What a piece of work it must have been. It was used to hold the 10 Commandments, God's holy laws, and it was the holiest thing in all Israel. The mere sight of it made the Israelites feel invincible. Well, the hostile Philistines knew this, and when the ark was taken in battle, they attacked and captured it, knowing the loss would rip the very heart out of Israel. And when Eli heard the news, he died of grief. Samuel became priest instead of Eli's sons. As he grew older, God would often stoop down to whisper in his ears news, commands, encouragements. It was time for Israel to have a king, said God, and Samuel was the one to anoint that king. The man Samuel anointed first was Saul, a great man, a great soldier. Saul was like a pillar of fire leading the Israelites through every hardship, keeping them safe from their enemies. But power does strange things to people. Saul began to forget that his crown had been given to him by God. He took no notice of Samuel's advice. Things started to go wrong. Seeing their chance, Israelite enemies closed in like prowling wolves when a campfire goes out. Samuel was a prophet. Not only could he hear God's voice, but he could see forward through time as though a dazzle of light. So he could soon foresee a time when Saul would not be king. God even told him where to look for Saul's replacement, among the sons of Jesse. But which of Jesse's many sons should he choose? That was the question. They were all fine, strong boys, tall and muscular. They might all make good warriors in the king's army. As Samuel met first one, then another, then a third, no lamp flickered in his soul. No voice spoke to him out of the farthest galaxy, saying, "This is the one." "Are these all the sons you have?" he asked Jesse. "All but for David, my youngest. He's out with the sheep," said Jesse. David was sent for, and Samuel studied him like a shepherd examining a newborn lamb. Yes, there it was, the face he'd been waiting to see. He anointed David with holy oil, just as he might a king. "Say nothing," he told father and son. "Not now, not yet." Times were bad. The Philistines were winning the war. David's older brothers went to fight in the king's army, but David was too young. He was trusted with no more than fetching and carrying. "Take your brothers these rations, David," said Jesse, "and come straight back." Long before David reached the camp of King Saul, he could hear the Philistine army jeering. Even as he handed his brothers the cheese and bread and raisins, he could hear the sneering jibes coming across the valley, the laughter and the cackles. "What's going on?" he asked. The Philistines issued a challenge. "Their champions against ours, and there's no one to answer it." "Why? Is he so terrifying?" asked David. "Have you seen him?" groaned a nearby soldier. "Tall as a horse." "Broad as a bull," said another. "Twice the size of a normal man. We don't stand a chance." Inside his tent, King Saul fumed with helpless rage. Does no one dare fight this man mountain? Is Israel full of cowards? But it wasn't a matter of cowardice. If one brave soul was to fight Goliath and lose, then all Israel would be lost, and no one wanted that responsibility. "There's a boy here who says he'll fight," said the guard at the tent doorway. It was David. At first Saul laughed and turned his back, but David ducked inside the tent. "Out in the fields guarding my father's sheep, I fought off a lion before now, wolves and bears. God helped me then. How much worse can this big bully be?" There must have been something in the boy's face, the same thing Samuel had seen. King Saul believed him. In fact, he began to take off his armour and hang it on David's small frame, leather tunic, chainmail, and a big brass helmet. David sagged under the weight like a tree under snow. His legs bowed. "I can't wear this," he protested, and he went as he was to fight the giant called Goliath. "What have you sent me? A stick to pick my teeth with?" roared Goliath. He cast a shadow as big as a building. David bent down as he crossed the stream and chose a handful of stones, round pebbles, and put them in his shepherd's bag. "Do the Israelites think I will laugh myself to death?" snorted Goliath. The noise of his armour was like a cart rattling over bumpy ground. David fitted a stone into the pouch of his sling. "Come closer, boy, and I'll pull you like a wishbone," boomed Goliath. His massive feet raised a cloud of dust as if he were ablaze. But David did not need to go any closer. He whirled his sling. It made a high, earring whooping, then let the pebble fly. "Well, are you just going to fight me? Are you going to fight me or just sit?" The giant broke off, his mouth a black circle of surprise. He reeled. He staggered. His hand went to his forehead. Then he fell. The ground shuddered. With a single gasp, the Philistines began to run. They'd lost their champion. They lost their advantage. The Israelites went after them like cats after mice. King Saul gazed at shepherd boy David with admiration and joy. From today I shall keep you by me all the time, he declared, and hugged the boy close. Sweat from his throat trickled down David's hair, just like the oil used to anoint a king. King Saul should have known that, said the boy, that David was more of a threat than Goliath. The carpenter looked at him sharply. Saul was his worst enemy. He had a dirty temper and fits of black misery. David could play the harp, and sometimes that soothed Saul's dark moods, but sometimes Saul would still throw things and rant and curse like a madman. The boy gave a lopsided sort of smile and looked firmly at the floor. Some people are like that, he said. They can't help it. So we've got Jesse. He's a tree because he's like the family tree. This is where Jesus' ancestors start to come into the story. So let's hang that on our... There we go, let's hang that on there. And then we've got David with his slingshot. Where should we put that? There we go. So here's the end of our collective worship today. And now I'm going to say a prayer. And if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen after me. Dear God, thank you that again we can listen to stories from the Bible. Thank you for all the things we've learnt today. And thank you that David stood up to the bully called Goliath and helped the Israelites to win. Help us always to stand up to bullies. Amen. God bless. See you soon.